to getting a grip on government spending. We'll be talking about government spending at the state level. My name's Talmadge Heflin. I'm the director of the Center for Fiscal Policy at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We're glad you're here. We're particularly glad you chose to come to this panel. I know you're here because you heard about all the money that the legislature is going to have, all the new money. So you probably came to listen to see what it would take to get your share. Was that it? Oh, okay, all right. Then we have four panelists. I'm going to introduce them all in the beginning and then allow them to come up and speak. It'll be Representative Caligari, Representative Coleman, and he will be along shortly. I think he stayed on the floor until they adjourned. And then Representative King, and we had to throw one person in that knew what they were talking about, so we got Senator Patrick. At any rate, we're glad.
Is this the NFL hearing? We can do that. Or Johnny Football, I can talk about that. Huh?
You can talk about that all day. Huh? Okay. What does it mean to get a grip on state spending? Really what we're talking about, or I think what we should be talking about, is what does the footprint of state government look like? Because it's a strange phenomena. Well, that's the train. I thought the computer's gone crazy.
We can't afford things like that, I know that.
It's probably, I thought I was.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Okay. I'm sure if that train stops, thousands of people will pour off of it. Yeah. That'll be my guess. But there's a strange phenomena that if you create a bucket or if you pass a law that requires some activity or some funding, if it's just activity, you got to fund a person to do whatever that activity is. So every bill that you pass or every bucket that you have out there, you're subject to drop money in it when the legislature meets. So that's the reason I think it's important that you pay attention to what the footprint of state government looks like. Expanding it could be a program, could be an agency. It could be doing more within a program that you got going on. And you tend to see expansion rather than contraction. And over the years, that's what we've seen. We've seen, you know, in defense of these folks sitting here, I doubt that there is any one of them that has come up with an idea to spend a dollar on their own. The idea comes from somebody requesting that dollar to be spent. Now, it's not that these are not smart people and they can't come up with ways to spend money, but there's enough people coming in and out of their door to take care of that for them, so they don't have to think about it.
Just my wife alone.
Yeah, right. So they need to think about, okay, how does this stack up with all of the other spending there? I remember several years ago, someone came into my office asking for more money for their agency. And their opening statement was, I don't want to compete with education or prisons or parks, but I just want to make my case for more money for my agency. And I said, well, you might as well leave now, because if you ask for money, you're competing with those people you just identified. There's no question about it. Everybody that comes in and asks for money from the legislature, they're competing with someone else. There's no magic amount of money. It is carved out, even in the area of highway funding, which is supposed to have dedicated funding. Over the years, with a little innovation, there's been ways to even dip into that pot that's supposed to just go to building roads, buying right of way and that sort of thing. So the key is, how do we keep the footprint of state government in control? First of all, if you look back from 1990 to last year, the spending grew by 310%. At the same time, population inflation only grew by 132%. That's state spending. We're not going to talk a lot about it, but local spending from 92 to 2009 grew by 201%, while population inflation only grew by 92%. So there's some expansion of the footprint. So how do you get a handle on that? Well, you start looking at the programs. If you could cut out such things possibly as the biggest part or big part of egg inspection. Now, when I go to the grocery store to buy a carton of eggs, I don't have enough confidence in the Department of Agriculture to not open that carton and see if I got some broken eggs in there. So that's double work. They've done it, I've done it, but I don't trust them enough to do it. Nothing against Commissioner Staples, nothing at all. It's just that that's something the consumer does. So you could do things like cutting that out. Now, it'd say, well, they only get $343,860 each fiscal year for $600,000 for the biennium. Why bother? See, that's the way spending grows. The test I put against spending is, I look, and I'm probably going to go over that a little bit, but let me know anyway. I look and see, okay, that's $687,000. How would that look if it suddenly showed up in my bank account? Would it be trivial, or would it have meaning? Now, in my bank account, it would have meaning. In some of your bank accounts, it may be trivial. But that's the test that I think we should all look at government spending. How would it appear if it was our personal money? Because I think the legislature should take better care of your money than they do of theirs. And I think if they did, they'd start looking at things like commissions on the Ark, Historical Commission, the Texas Board of Professional Geoscientists, the Funeral Services Commission. I've never been able to understand why we're protecting the dead with the funeral commission. You know, the licensing is supposed to protect the public. Well, they're already dead. What do we need to do? I know I'm being a little lighthearted. You're protecting those that are paying the bills for some. I might say there's no need to license professional engineers. Well, if I did, I know I was going to have a fight out of Representative Caligari because he sees the need to do that, being a professional engineer. And there's a reason for that. But there's a lot of the licensing agencies that I think could go away. And you might say, well, that doesn't cost us any money. That's paid by the people that are licensed. Well, guess what? When one of the professionals pay a licensing fee and then do work for you and charge you a fee, guess where that fee shows up? It's in your bill. You may not be able to see it, but it's there. So as we talked this morning about getting a grip on government spending, I hope you'll keep these things in mind and be willing to ask your legislators to look at programs like steroid testing. Do we get any bang out of that? Texas Emission Reduction Program, Texas Tourism Program. Most of these things, many of these things, the private sector can do more effectively and work it into their cost and into their profit scheme, and not have to have your dollars extracted from your account and then to provide you a service that the private sector can provide for you. Now, having said that, that's oversimplification. The process of going through that is really not that simple. We know that. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But we have 4 panelists this morning that are going to discuss that with you, and then they will stand for questions at the end, because hopefully you'll have a few. I'd like to go in the order that I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to introduce them all at one time, and then ask them to come up and speak and sit down when the timekeeper says it's time to sit down.
We'll follow your example.
Gus? I'm not going over about 30%. Okay. Representative Bill Caligari has served District 132 since 2000. He's chairman of the House Committee on Government Efficiency and Reform and the House Urban Affairs Committee. And he's also chairman of the House Research Organization and chairman of the Greater Houston Area Delegation. Do y'all do that every year now, or every 2 years? Pass it along? Okay. Following him will be Representative Garnet Coleman. Representative Coleman was elected in '91. He represents District 147, and he is the chair of the County Affairs Committee, senior ranking member of the Public Health Committee, and he's on the Calendars Committee. He's positioned to stop bills. Wow. Pass them as well.
Yeah, some that if I can get, I can't stop everything.
Representative Coleman, I believe, and he's never told me this, but I believe he learned the meaning of public service and civic duty at an early age because he grew up with a father that was a physician and very much involved in the local community. And for that, we'll be forever thankful. Representative Phil King served District 61. That's Parker and Wise County. Wise County, and there's some rural area in that, isn't it, Representative King? Yeah. These two guys, well, Representative Caligari may have a little rural area. They've been, instead of planting rice, they've been planting houses for years out there. But Representative Coleman has a very compact district in the area of Houston. And Representative King serves as a member of the House Committee on Urban Affairs and Elections. He is a board member on American Legislative Exchange Council and vice chair of the Texas Legislative Tea Party Caucus. Getting around to Senator Patrick, Senator Patrick, when he came into the Senate, he believed in visuals. He wanted people to see what money looked like. So he rounds up $1 million, brings it into the Capitol so people can see $1 million. And I've often, just recently wondered, what if Senator Patrick had been elected to the U.S. Senate and decided that he wanted to show them $1 trillion and bring $1 trillion in? And then I got to thinking, his job would be simple. We're fixing to mint $1 trillion coin. He just brings the coin in. So his job would have been made easy. But Senator Patrick is chair of the Senate Education Committee, and he has a lot of other committees and subcommittees, including Finance, Sunset, Health and Human Services, and Criminal Justice. And he'll be involved in a lot of other things. Now, I've had the good fortune of serving with the 3 gentlemen in the House. Senator Patrick came along after I was booted out, and on my attempt to come back, he did help me, but we didn't succeed. But I know these gentlemen well, and we appreciate you being here today, and Representative Caligari will give you the podium.
This is going to be a little tricky. Thank you very much. I do appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel with the distinguished other guys. And I'm going to start out talking about some things that, we'll talk about the spending issue, but I want to talk about the need to invest as well. So we've got to realize that while we're spending, we've got to do investing in our future. And I think the guys behind me can, kind of dissemble that and tell me how we're going to accomplish that. But let me get this thing started.
I hope I didn't kill it, but there it is.
That's good. It's here. All right. know, first thing we want to talk about, spending versus investment. Getting a grip on government spending. You know, one of the things I want to explain to you a little bit about my background. You know, I've really worked throughout the time I've been in. I came in the year 2000. 2001, I was elected in 2000. I've spent a lot of time working on two things, basically trying to reduce regulation and to reduce government spending. And I've found that some of the things that Talbot's talked about I've worked on for a long time. For instance, this issue of occupational license, and I've, over several years, have tried to pass bills that reduce and get rid of certain licenses. I've found out the hard way that it's very, very difficult to do. If you start taking licenses out one at a time, considering that there are only over 500 licenses in Texas, it'll take more sessions than I'm able to think that I could ever get elected to get rid of all of those. So I'm trying to find ways to reduce the effect of those. But it was very interesting. About a year or so ago, maybe a little less than that, we had Governor Bush from Florida come in and talk to us. And one of the things that he talked about was the fact that when he was governor, he would, during his tenure, would take out 5 licenses in one particular effort that he did. But he said before the session was over, they would add 10 more. When he did that, my chief of staff was in the audience, and he emailed me and he said he stole your speech, because I had been saying that for years. You take out a few and we add more than we take out, and in balance we end up regulating more industries than we need. And it's an issue that we need to continue to work on, and I'm trying to find ways to do it without taking them out one at a time. So if anybody has an idea of how to do that, please get back with me, let me know. But I have worked on a lot of issues that relate to how do we reduce spending, how do we move forward, on the other hand, with the things that we need to do. Things like water policy and eminent domain and transportation, and particularly government streamlining. How do we reduce government's impact on what we do every day? And I try to tell people in business, look at your business and, those issues that you have a concern about, that you think are bottlenecks to the things that you do, come back to us and tell us what those are and let us try to eliminate them. We can't look at your business and guess what your problems are. You can't just come to us and say, well, there are too many regulations. Tell us what regulations are the most troublesome to you, and give us an opportunity to try to work on that. But if you don't give us feedback, we can't help you. And I hope all of you remember that and pass that on to your clients and associates. You've got to tell us where the problems are so we can help you eliminate them, because we don't know your business as well as you do. Interestingly enough, as in the 2 sessions I've chaired the Government Reform Committee, we've been able to stop more than $1 billion of new government spending. So it is important that we watch what's happening and we try to eliminate that spending. That's extremely important that we keep a handle on that. We talk about curbing spending. I want to kind of walk through what's happened to us in the last few years. Over a 10-year period, when you look at the Legislative Budget Board, unadjusted for inflation, total state spending doubled from $49.5 billion in 2000 to $92 billion in 2010. That's state spending only. The equivalent, the $92 billion in 2010 is the equivalent of about $60 billion when you adjust it for inflation and population growth. That's an increase after you take out the population growth and growth and inflation. That's about 4.2% or every 2 years, or 2.1% a year. When you look at the fact that growth was caused not only by our own internal state spending, but particularly by increased requirements to support spending required by federal funding, federal government projects. If you look at only state spending without the federal intrusion, we actually went down about 6%. Now that's the good news. It doesn't mean that we're clear and we don't have to make any improvements in our spending, but it does mean that we've got to make a better effort to try to control what's happening from the federal standpoint. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have going forward, is to try to make sure that we do whatever we can, even though there are limits to what we can do, to limit the federal intrusion on our day-to-day business and the effect that it has on our budgets and our everyday lives, for that matter. But when you look at unadjusted for inflation and population growth, state expenditures from general revenue went from $27.3 billion in 2000 to $39 in 2010. That's an unadjusted increase of 47%. But again, when you look at strictly state spending, you know, without the government, the things required by the federal government, we actually have gone down, which is good news. But it means that we also have to keep check on that. One of the things I do want to talk about that, although I'm a very strong conservative, particularly when it comes to spending, but on all issues, but particularly spending, and I know many of my colleagues are. But when we look at that, we do have to look at our need to invest. So you know, there are some things that we need to do to this state to make sure that we continue to go forward, and that we do the things we have to do. Wait a minute, I'm back one. Okay, one of the things that really cost us a lot of money this last time was the drought. When you look at the drought and the effect it had, you know, the drought itself had a significant effect on what happened to us. The wildfires, all the things related to the drought were you know, a severe drain on our, you know, on the state, on the individuals in the state, on our agricultural community, and you know, on our state resources. Transportation, likewise, as we have increased our you know, our economy, and Texas has done, as you know, very much better than most all states combined. As we've increased that, we've increased the load on our highways, and that's created problems. When we talk about some of the issues that the road issues, for instance, you know, some of the cities have a 4 to 6 hour rush hour. Well, that's not a rush hour anymore. That's gridlock, and we've got to do something about that. So, in spite of the need to reduce spending, we've got to figure out how to do the things that keep us moving forward and do the things that we need to do. One thing I want to show you on the drought that's very interesting. When you look at droughts over the last 10 years, the drought of 2011 cost us $7.6 billion. That's a drain, an unexpected drain on the economy that we have to absorb as we go forward. The perspective right now is not really good. We had certainly got some rain yesterday that helped us a lot, but not nearly as much as we need. When you look on, let me show you some figures here. There are two lakes that are hard to see, but Lake Evie Spence, for instance, is down to less than 1% full. We've got several lakes in West Texas that are less than 5% and some that are less than 1% full. So, you know, we've got some severe issues that we need to deal with in terms of our, you know, of trying to make sure that we have adequate water to supply the state for the coming industries that continue to come to us, and make sure that we can handle. One of the real message here is that the water plan is simple. In serious drought conditions, Texas does not have and will not have enough water to meet the needs of its people, its business, and agriculture. So what do? How do we curb spending at the same time make sure we take care of these needs? And that's the challenge that we have this session and in sessions to come. How do we meet the needs of our water needs, of our transportation needs? You know, how do we do that without without overspending? And that's the challenge that I throw out to the rest of my colleagues. You know, how are we going to accomplish those things in the way that we need to make sure that we don't curb our ability to grow and to continue to be the best state in the nation, but also make sure we satisfy those needs. One of the solutions that has been projected, which I like, is the idea of maybe using, you know, I think the governor, let me back up, and the governor has said many times we don't want to use the rainy day fund to satisfy our everyday needs. We can look at the rainy day fund maybe to satisfy some one-time needs. A couple of the proposals that have been made are to use the rainy day fund to provide a basic fund for water funding, for instance, to help fund the Texas Water Plan. We've got to spend $53 billion plus in the next 40 to 50 years to implement the Texas Water Plan. That money's got to come from somewhere, and it can't come from the existing budget that we certainly have projected. One way is to take some money out of the rainy day fund, and I think you'll see some legislation that will do that. Use it as seed money, and then from that basic seed money, the money that's collected by the Texas Water Development Board with interest will be used to fund future projects. The same for transportation. I think we would look at the same prospect to maybe use some money from the rainy day fund and use it to fund some initial projects, and then those funds that would be paid back by local entities, by those entities that are doing the projects, to pay back and use those for further expansion, or excuse me, to fund future projects. Those are the initiatives that we need to look at. We need new ideas, new ways to approach it without increasing our ongoing budget on a day-to-day basis. The takeaways I would give you here are, one is to continue to be diligent about curbing state spending, and I have a bill that I have introduced, House Bill 88, that would ensure state spending is maintained at growth plus inflation. I think that's a goal we can attain and we need to shoot for, and at the same time we can find ways to finance the infrastructure that we need. But let's continue to be diligent about curbing state spending, and the way to do that is the thing that Talmadge talked about, is to start looking back at our regulations. Look at occupations and the money that occupations cost us. Look at various industries and the load that we're putting on our industries, on our businesses. I mean, all of us, a lot of you here have been in business. I have been, and I got involved in politics because of the effect it had on my business. I began to realize what it was doing to my business. That's why I got involved. If you'd asked me a year before I decided to run if I'd had any idea of doing that, I'd have said no. I don't want to be a politician, but I just felt that I had to do it to get involved in what government's doing to us. And it's gotten even more severe in those 10 plus 12 years that I've been in industry. I have three sons in business, and they've all been confronted with those same problems. How do you maintain a business? How do you maintain a business and put up with the things that we have to do from a government standpoint that we didn't have to 15 years ago when I had my business? I was doing some work with one of my sons recently, and I thought to myself, I don't know what I would do if I was confronted with some of the things that he has to do now that I didn't have to do 20 years ago or even 15 years ago. So that's one of the challenges that we have. We need to figure out how we can back off on some of these regulations and make sure that we do the things that let our businesses thrive without the limitations. Another takeaway is capital investment in infrastructure. Not frivolous spending, but spending we have to do, but try to determine new and innovative ways to finance those projects. And the third is one-way spending at local and federal levels. We need to do whatever we can to curb spending both at the local level and a federal level. There are a lot of things that I think we may be able to do within our state government to reduce the impact of the federal government on our day-to-day lives, and we really need to work on that, starting with spending issues. So with that, thank you.
I was never good at visual aids, so I don't have any money to pack up a slideshow. But I've been in this legislature now 21 years. I'm starting my 22nd year, and that's a long time. Talmadge, when I came in, I never thought I'd be number 9 in seniority. I just never thought that would ever happen. So I'm surprised to still be here. Talmadge and I work very closely together throughout, and sometimes we disagree vehemently, but we learned how to find common ground on appropriations when I had the honor of serving on appropriations with Talmadge. And he's the reason why there is a spending cap. Please give him applause. Because that wouldn't exist in Texas today, the one that we have, if Talmadge had not done that. So I also agree with Bill, because I'm a small business person too. And we have a challenge because of the fees that are being charged to small businesses for the licenses and the other that are going to prop up the state budget. And so there's probably about an increase, if you look over the, say, last 9 years, probably about $2 billion worth of fees. $2 billion worth of fees not going to serve the business interest that is paying the fees. They're in general revenue. Others are making sure that we can balance the budget. So you have these dollars out here that are the people's dollars that they paid in, not going for the things that they paid for. that the actual fee for the licensure is designed to pay for. So I think that that is a burden on business. What's most important as well is that when we look at the taxes that we have, there are two ways this works. And Talmadge was on Ways and Means, and Ways and Means and Appropriations, and he knows this. When we do a tax cut on somebody or allow them to have a tax cut, it actually costs the budget. It actually is money taken out of the budget, because if you have people who are paying taxes, if you say somebody else doesn't, then it fills in with other people continuing to spread that out over the overall budget of the state of Texas. We probably have at least $500 million in tax exemptions that cost the budget and have not been changed, and some of them are just antiquated. And so those are things that we need to look at to make sure that we're doing all we can do to reduce the subsidy to people who in state government who, quite frankly, don't need it. So those are the things that I think we really need to look at. Are we doing tax exemptions that we shouldn't do? Yes, there was an increase in spending in Texas from 2000 to today, but let's explain some of that. A lot of that is the tax cut that was done with the margins tax. And the amount of money that was spent on the local level, where the actual taxes dropped, is now spent by the state. So that part increased the budget because the state budget, but lowered the amount in property taxes on the local level. So the aggregate cost actually has leveled out or gone down, but on the state budget, it says it's more. And that's absolutely true. I think that we need to look at the margins tax again. We all thought and hoped that that would be the better thing for us in terms of balancing out dollars and creating new dollars. And I think a lot of people now know that that probably wasn't the best thing for us to do. And so we've tried, these gentlemen here, we've tried to take the burden away every session since. However, what that does is reduce the state budget, which some people may want. It reduces the state budget, but it's just a burden on people who can't afford it. And it's hurting business. And that's a real problem. Revenue. Bill said it earlier, we got to do something about our transportation system. This is a mess. And it's a mess because we bonded the dollars that we get from the federal and state gasoline tax for all of the money that we actually pull in. So there's no money anymore to actually get you back to your house while you're driving on the freeway. So public-private partnerships like good toll roads and things of that nature are there, but we have to prepare for our 35 million people that we're going to have. And so I do believe that we're behind on our transportation infrastructure, and I agree with Bill completely. And Talmadge will remember when that fight we had over the rider I had on the water plan. The water plan, I've actually put the water plan rider in the appropriations bill that created the state water plan. But I did that, I think, in 1993. So this is what Bill's talking about. We haven't done anything on that since 1993. If it wasn't for the drought, I think we'd still be saying we're not going to do anything on it. I believe that that is one of the biggest issues, along with transportation, that will bring a great future to our state, because that is what's going to allow us to grow and prosper. I'm not a person, I'm cheap. I mean, people wouldn't believe that, but I'm real cheap. And I think anything that we do should be done well and with the least amount of money that's possible to do it with. And sometimes we just haven't done that in this state. And we're making progress. So the reality is the more efficient state government can become, the more we can consolidate agencies, the more we don't have redundancies and those things. That is a great thing. So my view of this is first of all, we don't need new taxes. What we need to do is make sure that the priorities that create growth with no tax rate increase or no new taxes that goes into the tax structure that we already have, that's what we need to do. And that will make sure that government can do its essentials without tax increases. So, that's something that's important. Last thing I'll say, where am I? Man, the last thing I'll say is that it's time for us to come together to solve problems. Because if we don't solve problems together, like Talmadge and I did for many years, and all of us, Phil, then our future, our combined future, is going to be a challenge. I believe in cutting government spending. I believe there's appropriate government spending. But in the final analysis, if we're going to be efficient, we have to be together and talk about the priorities of what government does do. And I'm looking forward to continuing to have that conversation. Thanks.
Good morning, or I guess it's afternoon. Is it noon yet? Close to it? Okay. Just want to spin off a couple things that both Garnet and Bill said, kind of outside the presentation, but I think when we're talking about transportation and water and how do we do all these things, we're really talking about very large things. And I think there's kind of a mood in the legislature right now for Texas to get back to doing some big things. I'm on the board at ALEC, and I can tell you that as we go, as you talk to legislators from other states at all these conferences, they're really looking to Texas to try to understand how to lead the way, or they want us to lead the way in this economy. And I don't know, but I'm kind of excited about the opportunity. Last time everything was just completely dominated by how do we balance the budget. And before that, we had some other issues. It's been a while since we've really done, what I would call Texas big things. And I don't know the answers of how to do those in a conservative manner, in the best conservative manner. I don't know the best technological way to do things. But I know that we've got to deal with these transportation issues, and we've got to deal with these with the water issues, and we've got to continue to have a balanced budget. And when you put all those three things together, it's very difficult. But I'm really excited about it because I don't know, but I kind of sensed a mood when we came back that everybody's saying, hey, we can really do some things now with. We've got a balanced budget. We can really do some things now to fix education and to take on some of these other big things that are really just Texas big. But at the same time, we have got to continue to be exceptionally frugal. And we've got to continue to keep Texas the best place to do business. And, of course, that's by keeping low regulations and low taxes and basically trying to stay out of the private sector's way. One of the things I wanted to address in terms of cost savings, I really think we started doing this last time. We started a discussion last time where we were trying to find out where do we save some money. And one of the things that came up kind of actually late in the session was this idea of really looking at our employment structure. We've got 295,000 odd full-time employee or full-time employee equivalents in Texas government. Now, if you think about that, there's only 25 million people in Texas. So we've got something like one state employee for every 95 Texans. So if you get 95 people in the room, we've got 95 people here, you have an employee somewhere that's your employee for the state of Texas. And if you put that on a chart, it's been growing really exponentially in recent years. And a lot of it, frankly, has been growing on the Health and Human Services side, where there's a lot of federal issues or federal monies that come and the programs that come, and those always come with FTEs a part of that. And, of course, when the federal monies go away or begin to go away, you still have the employees. One of the things we actually passed an amendment to do this in the House last session. We actually passed it in the special when we were trying to do a cut for that session, or for that biennium, and then we also passed it again in the general budget. We lost it when it got over to the Senate on both cases, or the second time actually in the conference committee. But the idea was to try to identify a way, or try to force agencies to really identify what are their essential positions, and ultimately only fund those essential positions. In doing that, we found out we had a problem that really, I guess, we weren't aware of. Give an example. When we passed this amendment to do and I guess this was, I don't know, April or whenever it was, last budget or last session. Could I have that water? I'm sorry. I made the mistake of taking an antihistamine this morning, and now I can't even see y'all out there. My mouth's dry. But we passed an amendment that just said, just for the rest of that budget year, which was like 4 or 5 months, that we had a hiring freeze, just a simple hiring freeze. And we also said that any monies that were left from that hiring freeze would revert back to the general revenue budget. Well, it seemed like a practical thing. Nobody could get their hands around how much money that meant, but there were some estimates out of the comptroller's office that it might have been, well over $100 million just in that short time, because out of 295,000 employees and a 10% attrition rate, and you also had a lot of openings available at that time. What we found was I got a call from one agency I won't identify because it really is not the executive director's fault, because they had just recently taken over that agency. But this executive director called up and said, "Phil, you just killed our agency." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "We have 300 positions that have been open for a long time, I'm talking years, that we have no intention of filling." And what they would do, and we found out that a lot of agencies practice in that way. So it looks something like this. You're allowed X thousand, hi Craig, you're allowed X thousand FTEs for your agency. And over the course of that every year, about 10% resign, retire, or terminated, whatever happens. Or a lot of them are seasonal jobs. And so rather than filling that immediately, you delay filling that position. And you may delay it, frankly, you may delay it forever. Or you may just delay it 6 months or a year, as long as you can get through with that. Well, you and I think, and I thought, that when they did that, well, that money reverted back to GR somehow in the accounting process. But it doesn't. What it does is it creates a fund for that agency to use. And this one agency, for years, had intentionally been keeping 300 positions. And I'll tell you, they were substantive positions, 300 positions vacant, and they were using that for a totally different source. And so there's a bill out there this time, and what it tries to do is start up this discussion again. And what it says is that we're going to have a hiring freeze for the coming biennium, and it will freeze all non-essential positions. Now the question is, what is a non-essential position? And that's hard to define. We've been looking at some numbers, and LBB's been helping us a little bit. We think right now, and by the way, nobody can tell you exactly how many FTEs we have authorized in the state budget. Now, somebody may be able to, but we haven't been able to find anybody that can really readily access that data. I can tell you we had 295,000, I forget the exact number, employees right now, full-time employees, because I can tell you how many paychecks they cut. And you can add it up that way. But it's really hard even to find out how many authorized positions we have in state government. Well, we think right now there's around 9,017 vacancies. And we're estimating of those 9,000, there's about 5,000, what did we come up with, 5,461 that are probably not essential positions that are essential to the core function of that agency. Problem is, how do you identify that? Because if you're an executive director, every position to you is essential to the core operations, your core function. So what we've simply done is we've said, okay, the agency has the authority to identify each position as core or non-core. But any they identify as a core position, when it becomes vacant, they then have to notify the LBB and the governor's office that this is a core position and here's why. And then the bill gives the governor's office and gives the LBB the authority to then make further inquiries as to why that is an essential position. If they declare it as an essential position, they can go ahead and fill it. If they do not, then the position cannot be filled. It's under a hiring freeze, and all the funds for that revert back to the GR. They cannot be spent for another purpose. Because frankly, when you do that, what you're doing is you're taking funds that were budgeted by the legislature in a line item format for a particular use, and you're I don't want to say misappropriating those, but you're using them for a function that was not approved by the budget. And you know, the way government funding works, you can only spend things as authorized. You cannot spend things in an unauthorized manner. So I think that's really important. But if we can get some movement on that, I think you would be amazed at the size of our employment structure relative to what are really essential positions. The other thing I was just going to talk about real quick is this spending cap. I got 2 minutes. As you know, right now we've got a spending cap that is based on economic growth, and LBB meets every couple of years, and they measure economic growth, and it works like this. It says that they determine the rate of economic growth by dividing the estimated Texas total personal income for the next biennium by the estimated Texas total personal income for the current biennium. Okay? They take those two, that numerator and denominator, and they come up with the percent of growth that we are allowed in our next budget. Now, if you step back and you look at that, what it's really saying is, because it's looking at economic growth relative to personal income, what it's really saying is what is the maximum amount based on families and increased incomes that we can afford, that we are able to tax. Because the cap is based on how much more they can afford to have taken from them, which is really kind of a ridiculous approach. What has been proposed for a number of years, and I think really has a shot this time because the big three seem to be talking about it, and all the rest of us are too, is making that cap be the lower of the current factor that's used, or spending adjusted for inflation. I'm sorry, the other cap estimate would be that it has to be the lesser of the LBB economic growth rate or population growth indexed for inflation. And so what you would do each time is LBB would do the projections exactly like they do today. How much can Texas afford to spend based on how much their income has increased? And then you would have the other alternative, which would be you would take the population growth, if that's 3%, and then you would take the inflation rate, if that's 4%, then you would be able to allow 7% growth. And then the lower of those two would be the spending cap in our next budget. And the key is to make that constitutional, because we've got a pretty conservative legislature now. But you know, California was the Texas not too many decades ago, until some very, very liberal spending policies and regulatory policies got out of control. And there's no reason that the same thing can't happen here in Texas. And so we don't know what future legislatures are going to look like. We don't know what future governors are going to look like. And so I think it's very important that we redefine that spending cap, put it in the Texas Constitution. I will guarantee you the voters of Texas will approve it. And to give that safety net, it's nothing that we're going to really need this session. I don't think we're going to need it for a few sessions. But I got a bad feeling in not too many years we will, because we do not know what the Texas of the future will look like. So anyway, I think we need to take a hard look at our employment structure. We are labor intensive, and everybody in business here knows that that's how you save money, is you save it on the employment side. And we also need to really look at implementing the spending cap at a constitutional level with a different formula other than how much more can people afford to lose to government in the next biennium. So anyway, thank you.
There comes that publicly subsidized train again with no one on it. Just a reminder. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Patrick. And first of all, I want to get back to what Talmadge said about the $1 million that I brought in. It didn't go down very well with some of our elected officials. They thought I was trying to grandstand. I was trying to make a point, because one day it occurred to me, and back then the budget was $164 billion, and that was just 2007. I guess that was 6 and 7. It occurred to me, how many stacks of $1 million is that? Because when I think of government spending, I think of how much it breaks down. I'm in the radio business. I'm successful or not successful based on the number of commercials that I sell. We only have so many minutes in the Rush Limbaugh show or the Dan Patrick show to sell. Usually it's about 15 minutes an hour. So I take my expenses and I divide that by 15 minutes by 13 hours, which is 6A to 7P. We call that kind of the golden time after 7 p.m. at night. Not many people listen to radio. Times 5 days. So I have so many minutes. I have to sell them for so much to make a profit. So I think of everything, and I'm a salesman at heart, and I've always been a salesman. I think of everything in little squares, and how do I get to where I need to get? So I thought, okay, how many stacks of $1 million is that? And how many taxpayers does it take to generate $1 million? Because when I see a federal government program or a state program, and I say it's X dollars, and I think it's stupid X dollars, and it's more than or about what I pay in taxes, well, maybe my money was taken out for that stupid project. So I value every dollar based on someone is paying it. It's their money. And if we're going to ask you to pay taxes, we shouldn't spend your money on stupid things or unneeded things. People, if you go to the public and you make your case of why something is important, they usually will fund it within their means. For example, the easiest one is very clear. Police department needs bulletproof vest. Public says, okay, got it. Not a problem. As opposed to, and let's say those vests cost $1 million. As opposed to, police department needs $1 million. There's a difference. So I think we always have to prove up how we spend the money and what it's for. Now getting back to that $1 million, the quick story on that is, I didn't have $1 million. So I borrowed $1 million. And it's a real interesting process. Logan, my chief of staff, is over there. He remembers it well. I called a bank. Actually, we called some banks. We said, we need to borrow $1 million for like an hour. And they said, what for? I said, well, I'm a new senator, and I want to make this presentation. And you know, banks don't have $1 million. So they had to, we did this a couple of weeks in advance or a week in advance, so they had to arrange with a federal bank to get $1 million to their bank. Well, I had to get it to the Capitol, which requires a Brinks truck. And then when it got to the Capitol, once it's off that Brinks truck, it's insured. But once it gets to the Capitol steps, it's mine. So now I've got to guard $1 million. So I need DPS. See how things work in life? Nothing is simple. And the $1 million arrived. Oh, there's one other thing I should mention here. I didn't tell my wife. Because we had to put up collateral for the $1 million. You don't get $1 million in your name, especially if you're a politician. So the $1 million came, and you know $1 million, and I had it in 20, was it 20s, Logan? I had it in 20s. You know $1 million came in a big plastic bag. It goes from about here to about here. That's it. Not that high. Not very big. But what I wanted my colleagues, and of course I was the freshman, some said the brash, eccentric freshman.
Still do.
Yeah, I know. Thank you very much, Bill. And you know what? When they quit saying that, it might be time to exit. It takes 164,000, as I recall, stacks of $1 million to get to our budget of 164 billion. I think that's the math, if I recall it. So I try to get our members to visualize 164,000 of those plastic bags on the Senate floor. And that each bag, and then I calculate about each citizen. It depends, because you know, we're in an interesting state of trying to figure out how much you pay in taxes. Because most of your taxes are property tax, local taxes. I mean, the taxes we get to spend here of your money in our budget are sales tax. So I don't know how much you spend a year. I don't know how much you make a year. But maybe it's, if you actually, the amount of money that, and I can't account for fees because that gets, you know, all these other, but just in pure taxes, you know, there are 3 ways to tax people: income, property, and sales. Well, our property taxes stay local. We don't have an income tax, thank goodness. So it's the sales taxes. That's about, what, 55% of all the money we bring in that we have to spend. Well, and so I calculated that about, if you averaged it out, a person spends $2,000 to $3,000 at the time in sales tax. But, you know, and it's hard to figure that out. If you buy a car one year, you're going to spend, you know, might spend, you know, a little bit more than that. So then I said, let's round the number off to 5,000. So how many people, how many times is 5,000 to a million? And that's how many people that, remember, I'm a box guy. How many, each bag represented so many people. And then I said, can't we find a way to at least take some of those stacks off the floor? Do we really need all of those? And each time you take the stack off the floor, and if you really make it count for something, that means we're spending your money more wisely. Now, the end of the story is, I got that money off the Senate floor as fast as I could, got it back in the Brinks truck, but I had to have it for 24 hours, as I recall. So I had to pay interest on it. But somehow, and I'm not sure how this worked, because I only had to pay interest on the time I actually had it out of the bank and borrowed it, but I had to have control of it in the bank for most of the day. I actually made $18. So then I calculated, remember, I'm a box guy. If I had borrowed $10 million, I'd have made $180. And if I did that over 30 days, I could make $6,000, $7,000 a year just by borrowing $10 million every day. I don't think it really would work out that way, but it sounds like the way sometimes government thinks, maybe particularly in Washington or California or some of these states that are failing. I'm going to give you, as you know, I'm chairman of board education, and one of the things we're going to talk about are virtual schools, not here. We're going to talk about school choice later. But I'm a virtual guy. So Garnet said, Phil, they all do slide presentations, and Bill did a very nice slide presentation. Well, I'm going to give you my slide presentation. It's a virtual slide presentation. And if you'll notice that big circle there, at the top of that circle, you'll see the number 91, right under the chrome thing holding the frame up. Everybody see 91, okay? There's always an Aggie in the back that says, can you make it a little brighter? I can't quite see it. Just kidding. Aggies are in pretty good shape these days. 91. Now, these are approximate numbers. Any media here? Do we allow media besides me? Okay, there's media. So I really say this in advance because media always says, you know, someone said something. And, you know, we did a fact check on that, and they were $12 off. Or they were, I'm speaking in general terms, okay? I'm just trying to make a point. It's been already 40 minutes, and I don't want people to gloss over. Roughly, if you drew a line from the 91, and I always think of a circle like a clock. So 12 is up there at the top. If you draw a circle, I mean, if you draw a line from the 12 to 6 and cut it in half, that's roughly what we spend on education. So when you hear people say, you know, we don't spend enough money on education, it's roughly, right, Tommy? I go to him. About half our budget, roughly. And depending how you look at the numbers, K through 16, K through 12, federal fund. But I'm just talking about half the budget. Now, if you go from 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock, that little piece of pie, that's Medicaid, 25%, which about a decade ago was about, you guys were 10%. And projected to be about 38% in another 10 to 12 years. So 75% of the budget, roughly, to our media friends, is education and health care, Medicaid primarily. And then another slight little sliver, 10%, is for public safety. So when you get to, down to 30 seconds, gosh, when you get down to looking at the budget, and we took some heat from cutting it last time, but you know, how can you cut education? Oh my goodness, terrible. You know, we're going to cut $5 billion out of 45. I mean, I actually have some school districts that gave their teachers a raise, thank goodness. I had some school districts that cut their taxes. So it wasn't too bad for everyone. But my point is, if you have a deficit like we had last time, if 85% of the budget is 3 items, and you really can't touch the Medicaid side, we had no choice. And so what we want to do moving forward, and I agree with Garnet, we need statesmen, not politicians. I'm really getting tired of politicians who draw a line and say, I'm not for that. Well, how about reading the bill first? You know, at least before you say you're not for it, study it. But we do need statesmen to find solutions. Republicans and Democrats, liberals, moderates, and conservatives, because we're all in this for the same thing. Thomas Jefferson said, a difference of opinion is not necessarily a difference in principle. I don't believe that my friends across the aisle want to see the state of Texas go in the tank. And I sure know that Republican conservatives don't want to see Texas go into the tank. But there are different views of how we keep our head above water and how we prosper. And that's what politics is about. And there'll always be some issues that we can't find agreement on. But on water and infrastructure and transportation and education, those are nonpartisan issues. That's about the future of Texas. And I'll finish my little comment. So you all remember this now if I give you a test later? 91, roughly, half, roughly for education, 25% roughly Medicaid, 10% public safety. And that's why we can't spend all the money. We have to save our money because we don't know what the future holds. It looked dire a few years ago. It could look dire a few years ago. Texas will always be better than everyone else if we do it right. Here are the last numbers. As Garnet said, I believe, we're going to have 38 million, 35 million people. The demographers tell us when George Bush left in 1999, 2000 to become president, there were 18 million of us, there are 25 million of us. Our state demographers tell us by 2040, there'll be about 40 to 45 million. Now, that sounds like a long time. That's 28 years. That's only 14 sessions. Remember, I'm a box guy. And we only vote on bills about 2 months out of each session. That's 28 months. So we have 28 months of real-time voting on the floor to pass legislation to solve the problems and take advantage of the opportunities of 20 million more Texans. And that's why you need people with a vision. And that's why we don't need politicians. And that's why we need statesmen and women to address these problems and opportunities seriously so that we do not become California. Thank you very much.
Okay,
You can turn off my slide.
right.
Say maybe 30 seconds.
Okay, got it off. Yeah, thanks. All right, your turn now. We're going to be pretty rushed, but we're going to try to get a few questions in. Does anyone have a question of the panel? We have one here in the back. Wait on the mic, if you will, so we can record it.
Thank you very much. My question is to Representative Calgary. Before 2003, this state funded its roads with pay-as-you-go, no debt. Since then, we've built tremendous debt in this state. It's about $31 billion interest in principal for the state side and about $30 billion interest in principal at the local unfunded mandate debt. Now, you mentioned that we were thinking about using the rainy day seed money to fund transportation. Does this mean that you're going to continue the policy with debt? Is this going to set up a bonding program where we still have to use debt to fund our roads, or is this pay-as-you-go?
This is a projection that basically you take the, let's say you start with $1 billion that's given, that's used strictly for that purpose, that would not incur any interest by the transportation department, would go into that as seed money. That money would be loaned out to a number of projects, and as those projects begin to pay that money back, they pay basically you may have 100 projects that use up that $1 billion, and each one would incur an interest rate of whatever it is, 4, 5, 6%. As they pay it back, you use that principal plus the interest that's generated to loan to future projects. But that first $1 billion has no interest carry on it. It's just in the debt of that, that agency that carries, and that you presume someday might be paid back.
That does sound like debt to me. Using the seed money to create debt down the future.
But it's I mean, you can call it debt, but it's a way to begin to provide seed money from a source that exists, where we got money available today. We don't want to use rainy day funds for ongoing expenses, but for one-time only expenses, and that's one that you would use. You basically, I guess you could say you would give it to the Transportation Department and let them use it to leverage future projects.
Other questions?
Thomas, I
Yeah,
just want to say something
please.
really quick on that. Sir, to your question, when you said, in the past, and I wasn't here in the past, I've only been here since 07, but in the past, the reason we were able to pay for things was a model. Cars pay gas tax. The more cars on the road buy more gas, that builds more roads for more cars. And that worked while everyone was getting 12 to 16 miles to a gallon. And now the average is over 20 miles to a gallon. So today, that model is broken. We have millions of more cars on the road, but we're collecting about the same amount of gas tax today as we did in the 1999. So we don't even have enough money to keep up with what we have, so we have to find a solution. I'm not sure what the solution is yet, but the gas tax model really doesn't work anymore. So that's what's happened.
Other question?
And one of the alternatives to that is a per mile cost, and that's
Which
not
is what you pay
necessarily
on the
best
toll.
way. Yeah.
You pay a per mile cost on the
Yeah.
toll.
Right.
Yeah, to go along that. We've taken the money from the gas tax, though, like we have with registration, like we have with car sales tax, like we have with the lottery, and put it into the general fund instead of putting it where we voted on it as taxpayers for it to go to. We've robbed the gas tax, which we're robbing the highways, which we're increasing our debt.
Well, you're correct, and again, it's always nice to say I wasn't there when that happened, and we've been trying to fix it, but it's roughly 500 million going to education, I think is the number, and some was going to DPS, and so we can replace it. It's a part of it, but wouldn't come close to still solving the problem. But it needs to be, look, I agree with you. If we're gonna have a dedicated tax, if it's Parks and Wildlife, it's whatever, it needs to go where it's supposed to go. We shouldn't be spending it to the general fund. But it's happened so long now, to replace that is gonna blow a hole somewhere else. So the education folks say, if you wanna take it, fine, but give me that 500 million back. So you're right, and we should have never done it, and we need to fix it.